my job, I guess, to introduce Kim, who is not only the naturalist down here, but a member of our bird club. Welcome. We're just starting, not missing a thing. And for both members and non-members, I thought I would read, if I remembered to bring it, which I seem not to have, but that's okay, I won't read it and save some time. But I have two poems. I always start with a little literature of some sort. One, I think, is a poem that probably most of you know. It comes from a Victorian age by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And unlike most of his poems, this will not take a lot of your attention for a long time. It's called The Eagle. He clasps the crag with crooked hands, close to the sun in lonely lands. Ringed with the azure world he stands. The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls. He watches from his mountain walls, and like a thunderbolt he falls. And the other one is, I was going to say anonymous. It's just a poem that has no author, and I don't like calling it anonymous. It comes from the Chippewa or Ojibwe tradition, and so it's just one of their spiritual songs. And it is called The Eagle. Mighty eagle, I fain would see my destiny and know my impending fates, to live my life in harmony with fortune, chances, and states. But I scarce know the day's event. I cannot see o'er the rim, I cannot see o'er the present, into the ages far and dim. In vain I scan the past for signs and marks, sharp and clear, to guide my way into the last, but memory faded by the year. Confound what was with what was not, blends fact and fancy into one, fixed clouded lot, fouling steps that must be done. Mighty eagle, I deign what I have your powers, of vision, strength, and courage, to wield against the unborn hours of troubles upon my pilgrimage, my spirit seeking fullness, and the heart tending toward peace, my deeds done in goodness, then would my worth find increase. And before I introduce Kim, I just want to say a couple of things. This is the Northfield Bird Club as well as the Mountain Project down here. We do a number of programs together. Kim is the naturalist here. On the back table is a box with a slot in the top of it. We do not have dues, and we have a couple of programs coming up that we have to pay for. Up until now, we have not had to pay. We've had volunteers doing our programs, and some of you know they've been really excellent programs. But if you can spare some, then it doesn't have to come all out of my pocket. Three people already have generously given $20 apiece, and I don't expect that much from anyone in particular, but if others of you could add to that, it would be really helpful. If you're new to us, we say that basically if you want to be a member of the club, you attend one of our programs, or you come to one of our walks, and you give me your email, which you can do online, and I'll tell you how to do that in a minute, and you become a member. There are no fees, and we have amateurs from fairly good birders to beginners. And I'm proud to say at this point, as far as I can tell, I haven't seen any competitive spirit. It's all been cooperative spirit. And I really like that too. The way to get in touch with me is that if you go on Google and you put in Northfield Bird Club, it's the only Northfield Bird Club in the globe, I guess. So that if you put in that, you'll get access to the website, which is maintained by Ted. He does an excellent job. And my name and email is available through that. So if you want to know about our programs, they're there. If you want to be on my email list where I send out notices from time to time, just check the website. Kim is what I like to say is that Kim is a student of ornithology. and will always be, and will continue to be, and is continuing learning more. One of the strange things that has happened in this process was that I went to Bowdoin College, and my last year there, I took a course in ornithology, and there was a new professor. At that point, I guess he was not even assistant professor, and quite a few years later, Kim went to Bowdoin and had the same professor. Probably near his last year or so, wasn't it? Pretty close. Yeah. So that we both had that experience in going to the island that Bowdoin owns off the Bay of Fundy, and watching, in my case, watching for a lot of birds that never materialized at that point, some of which have been reestablished and are now again dying off because of the warming of the ocean off the coast of Maine, which is significant. But so Kim, who is the naturalist that works here and is a student of ornithology, it's all yours.
Always learning. Thank you, Nick.
Yep.
And I echo Nick's comments about the cooperative nature of the Bird Club. It's just a really nice, low-key group of people, and it's been really fun to connect with you all. None of those donated funds would go to the mountain. They're all for future programs that would take place at either the library or here in the coming year. So just to let you know that. So my name is Kim Noyes. I coordinate the education programs at Northfield Mountain, and decided to make up this program and share it with you tonight. So this is the debut, so just so you know. We have a crow program coming up for the Bird Club that was originally scheduled for tonight, and we moved it to January. So just to give an announcement about that, it's called A Murder of Crows. It'll be Tuesday, January 8th here at 5:30, and it'll be done by the education coordinator from the Mass Audubon for the Connecticut River Valley Sanctuaries. She is a crow fanatic. She loves crows, and she's excited to share some of her information with you all. Another program coming up with our very own Northfield Bird Club member, David Brown, who's going to be giving an indoor program on wildlife tracking. I know some of you may have seen it at the library last year, so this will be a similar program. So that'll be coming up in late January, January 23rd. So those programs are all. All right, with that, we'll get started on the bald eagle. There we go. We're going to leave the light on because of the filming. If I turn it off, it gets too dark. And the HVAC system, I realize, makes some noise. Can everybody hear me? Just want to check in terms of volume. If I turn it off, we get no heat. So we have to sort of choose. All right, so the bald eagle. And what I wanted to share is a little bit about the natural history, the decline and rebound of our national symbol. And it's with the Northfield Bird Club as well. So the bald eagle is a special bird for me for, I think, really two reasons. One, when I had been here just a few years in 1989, we got a phone call in January that there was a nesting pair that was starting to build a nest at Barton Cove on the Connecticut River in Gill. It was so exciting. It was the first nest in the Connecticut River Valley in probably at least 100 years, if not longer. So this was a really big deal. They'd chosen Barton Cove as their spot, and so that nest first started in 1989. So for almost 30 years, I've watched the eagles, the adults, and the young as they have fledged their young and hung out in the Barton Cove area and on the river. So they've sort of become a special bird for me. The other is that when I grew up, you didn't see eagles. I grew up in Maryland. Eagles were a really, really rare sight. I started birding in New England. And it was a really rare sight. And now they're a relatively common bird. They're still very special and beautiful to see. But they're sort of, having grown up as part of the environmental movement, they're really a symbol of the success, or one success from the environmental movement. And so I think for both those reasons, they mean a lot to me. They're also the symbol of our country. I'm not the only one that thought they were special. Obviously, other people did. So they were chosen in 1782 as the national emblem. They started the process in 1776 and couldn't really agree. It was Jefferson, Adams and Franklin, they were sort of the task force to decide the national emblem. Eventually, the first public image, the first time it was used publicly, 1782, was this symbol. So we have the white head and tail distinctively of the eagle. We have 13 arrows, 13 stripes, 13 stars, the 13 original states. We have also an olive branch, and the eagle is looking towards the olive branch, so it's sort of a strength and a peace, and it's looking towards the peace. It appears on passports. It appears on a dollar that I happen to find in my wallet. It appears on a quarter. It's used on a lot of different symbols in our country, and it was chosen for a number of different reasons. It was chosen because it's a beautiful bird. It's just a majestic bird if you see it in flight, or if you see it perching, that white head, that white tail, that contrast. It was also chosen because of its strength and its courage. We're a brand new country at that point, 1782. We wanted to be strong. We wanted to be fearless, and so that was another reason that they chose it. It's a very successful bird of prey. It also has a long life. It's known for longevity. It lives 25 to 30 years, is a pretty normal lifespan. This is a brand new brand new country. It represented freedom, and they wanted that to live for a really long time, and here we are a couple hundred years later, and it's still active. It was also native and unique to North America. So for all those reasons, they chose the bald eagle. Haliaeetus leucocephalus. Haliaeetus is the genus. That's the genus that means the fish or sea eagles. Of that genus, there are 8 species. Leucocephalus, the bald eagle, is the only one that we have that's commonly seen in North America. Think of the bald eagle, and we think of bald in terms of a head as lacking feathers or lacking fur or hair. But in fact, that's not where the name bald eagle came from. It's an Old English word, B-A-L-D-E, which means white. So it's that white head and that white tail that it got the Latin name for. Leuco is white in Latin, and cephalus is head. So it means sort of the sea eagle, the fish eagle with the white head. The young eagle looks quite different. It's brown, sort of a motley dark brown and white. Still has those bright yellow talons. The beak has not turned bright white yet. And it goes from darker to lighter as it gets older, so it's a little bit lighter as a second-year-old bird, a little bit lighter as a third-year-old bird, and then by the time it's 4 to 5 years, it has that bright white head and that bright white tail. A couple of birds it can be confused with. If you get a good look at an adult bald eagle, you're not going to confuse it with anything. If it's an immature eagle, it can be confused with the golden eagle, whether the adult or the immature. A darker brown, some mottled white, really mottled white right here with the young adult eagle. The golden eagle has more distinct white if you see it under the wings or under the tail. So it's not as sort of messy looking, if I can call it that. The other thing is the flight. The flight's a little bit different. So the flight of a bald eagle is really straight. Just straight, flat wings. Somebody described it as a 2x12 plank, just soaring or gliding in the air. The golden eagle's wings are a little bit more tilted up as a V, a little bit more of a dihedral flight. The other bird that's really common around here is the turkey vulture, another very large, dark brown bird. So if I'm looking up in the sky, especially over the river, and I see a big, dark brown bird, I think, oh, could be an eagle, could be a turkey vulture. I often, if I don't have binoculars, I may be too far for me to see the white head and the tail. But what I'm going to look for is the flight. So that turkey vulture has this dihedral flight. It's like a shallow V. And so you'll see this V silhouette, and it rocks. The bald eagle is just going to be straight. And the golden eagle is sort of a compromise in between if you're seeing it from a distance. The golden eagle is a rare fall and winter visitor, so you could see it around here. So here's this 2x12, and I'm even going to call it a 2 by 14 foot plank, because the average wings are about 7 feet. So just to give you a sense, this is pretty much realistic of the span of an eagle's wings. This is a big bird. This is a really big bird. Covered with 7,000 feathers. It can fly 36 to 42 miles per hour. That's pretty fast. If you think about driving along a road at 40 miles per hour, that eagle can fly. And it can dive up to 100 miles per hour. So it's a really strong flyer. Nick asked me earlier if I had a permit. Yes, I do. This is totally legal. I want you to know. I have some eagle feathers that I have an educational permit for. So I'll pass these around. This is from the tail. This is from the primary, the wing feathers. So the outer wing feathers, the flight feathers.
Yeah,
So just to see the
law that
size.
You cannot own an eagle feather. You cannot have one in your possession without a permit. Uh-oh.
And if anyone wants to check, I have the permit upstairs, just so you know. So we'll just pass these around.
You have to get a permit from your truck.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's permit, and I'm saying, research is permissible too. I mean, she's got a permit, so.
No.
Yeah, so the idea is to protect. So if you have a piece of the eagle, then they know where you got it from. You can document that you have that. It's a form of protection. Amazing flyer, beautiful bird. In terms of habitat, what they're going to be looking for, they want to be near a large body of water. It could be marine, could be freshwater. They need a lot of fish. That's pretty much what they eat. They want to be near forest too. So forested shore is essentially what they need. They need these tall trees for perching. They need them for nesting. So that's what they're looking for. Amazing eyesight. Eagle eye, if someone has really good vision, keen vision, you'll say, oh, they have an eagle eye. So these eyes are amazing. If you think about like binocular, if I use these, I can see, this is probably 8 power, I can see 8 times what I could normally see. Eagles, the average is 4 to 8 times. So take an average, they can see 6 times better than we can at least. A study done, they could see an animal the size of a rabbit running 2 miles away. And the other thing that I thought was so cool is their eyes can see 2 different ways at the same time. So their eyes can act totally independently, and each eye has 2 focal areas inside each eye. So you can look straight forward and at a 45-degree angle at the same time. So that angled vision is for distance, would be movement, distance. Straight would be more depth and clarity. So let's all try that, all right? So look straight ahead at something let's just try with one eye. And then, while you're looking straight ahead, try to also look at a 45-degree angle at the same time. I don't know about you, but I could see both, but I could really only focus on one of those areas at the same time. But the eagle can focus on both. So it can focus up front and to the side with both eyes. So needless to say, it's a really good predator. That eyesight has helped it a lot. That beak is used like a knife and fork, used for tearing apart the flesh of the prey that it's eating. Amazing predator. The talons, the ability to close those talons and use it for killing. Its prey is from its really strong, powerful leg muscles. Great eyesight, the beak, amazing flight, and it's going to catch food. And here it's caught a fish. So it's got sort of a medium-sized fish. In terms of a diet, 70 to 90% or so of its diet is fish. It'll also eat small and large mammals. It can kill a mammal that's larger than it is, weighs, let's say, 12 pounds, so it can kill a larger mammal, and it'll eat waterfowl, ducks as well. It also, its prey doesn't have to be alive. It's also a scavenger, and it's also known for stealing fish and food from other animals like an osprey. So its reputation's a little shaky in that way. In terms of food, it can fly with about a 4-pound prey, whatever that would be, which is pretty heavy. It's about a third of its body weight, so it weighs about 8 to 15 pounds, so an average would be 12 pounds. So it can carry a third of its body weight while it's flying. If it caught an animal that was larger than that, it would have to eat it right on the shore, wherever it was. So when I was looking for a dollar bill to photograph, to take a picture that's earlier in the slideshow, looking at the emblem, I also was looking for one with Ben Franklin on it. And I didn't have any. It's a $100 bill. I had a lot of dollar bills, but I didn't have any $100 bills in my wallet. The reason I was looking for one with Ben Franklin is because I had read about this discussion, and he really didn't think that the bald eagle should be our national emblem. He felt pretty strongly about it. So I want to share his thoughts. I wish that the bald eagle had not been chosen as a representative of our country. He is a bird of bad moral character. He does not get his living honestly. You may have seen him perched on some dead tree where, too lazy to fish for himself, he watches the labor of the fishing hawk. And when that diligent bird has at length taken a fish and is bearing it to its nest for the support of its mate and young ones, the bald eagle pursues him and takes it from him. Besides, he is a rank coward. The little kingbird, not bigger than a sparrow, attacks him boldly and drives him out of the district. He is therefore by no means a proper emblem for the brave and honest of America. For a truth, the turkey is in comparison a much more respectable bird, and withal a true original native of America, a bird of courage and would not hesitate to attack a grenadier of the British Guards who should presume to invade his farmyard with a red coat on. We're going back to the 1780s when this was written. Clearly, Ben Franklin lost, Jefferson and Adam won in terms of it being the national emblem. But it's true. It will steal food from other birds, and it will definitely, it's a scavenger, it will definitely eat dead animals. And it's interesting that Ben Franklin must have been a bird watcher to have sort of watched and observed all of that. He could have been a member of our Northfield Bird Club if he lived later. In terms of nesting, the eagles don't mate for life. And they can live 25 to 30 years, so they can be together potentially for 25 years or more. We just don't, we don't really know. There are also nest site specific, so they'll return to the same nest year after year after year. Average nest, about 5 feet, maybe 4 feet deep. But they're going to add to it year after year, so it can grow if this nest has been active for a long time. The largest nest recorded was found in Florida. It was longer than this table. So if I were to draw a diameter, it would sort of encompass, this nest would almost encompass all of us. It's a big nest. 20 feet deep, twice this in depth. And weighed, who wants to guess how much it weighed?
8 ton.
8 ton. Ooh, that'd be a lot. That would be 160,000 pounds, okay? Who has another guess?
2 tons.
2, okay? In between. Want to pick a number? Four. Excellent guess. Compromise between 2 and 4 would be 3. 6,000 pounds. Can you imagine? I mean, that's a record, but can you imagine how big that nest is? And the nest would be lined with soft material. They would line it with pine sprigs, grasses, rushes, mosses, and create this nice soft lining.
Will eagles reuse other eagles' nests? Was that one just like lifespan for mating pair?
So usually, it's an excellent question. Usually what happens is, so the pair will return to the same site. And what often happens is if one of those eagles didn't make it through the winter and didn't return, one of those eagles will stay at that site and find a different mate. So they will return. A new pair would be really rare for a new pair to use a new nest.
An
'Cause-
old nest.
An old nest,
Yes.
because one of those returning animals
But
would
if they
return.
died off, would they sort of like rehab it, like, I guess?
They might if it made sense, but often they're going to return to that same area if one's alive because they know it's a good area to raise their young because they did it before. So they're going to imprint on that area. They will often rebuild another nest nearby, and they are very territorial. So you wouldn't have two eagle pairs living quite close to each other.
Like, when you say close, what do you mean by close?
Well, it's interesting. Close can be sort of a visual piece. Like at Barton Cove, there are two nests pretty close to each other. So as an eagle or a crow would fly, they're about a mile apart. One nest is a little bit upriver from Schutzenverein. So sort of across from Schutzenverein, the more current nest is below where the industrial park is. The other nest is on the island of Barton Cove. So those nests are pretty close apart. They're about a mile. But the Barton Cove Ridge sort of is a visual border, and they tend to stay on each side. And
Well, a new one
they don't-
appeared by the Sunderland Bridge, and that's why I asked,
Mhm.
and there's one upstream not too far.
Yeah.
There's a lot on the river, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Actually, there are at least 12 nests in the past year. And what's happening is more and more nests. The young are imprinting on the same area. They're returning. They're looking for more habitat. So they're just going to increase. So it seems like they're sort of squeezing into the middle of two existing nests. So they seem to be getting closer and closer.
Young every year? Do they have young every year?
Not every year they're successful, but they will lay an average of 2 eggs every year. At the Barton Cove nest, it's about 1.6, I believe, in terms of the
I didn't know
average
if there was, like, a
fledglings
year
per
between,
year.
like bears, sometimes they nurture their cubs. I didn't know if that was
No,
the case
not for
with you.
eagles. So once they're 5 years old, they usually breed, and then they'll usually try to breed every year continually. Although they may not start till they're 6 or 7.
Made tough. So I flew an amphibious ultralight for years. And took it off from Turner's Falls once.
Uh-huh.
And, I was about 1,200 feet, and I looked down and I saw an eagle, maybe 300 or 400 feet below me, and it was descending on an osprey that had a fish in its mouth.
Yeah.
And I went in circles over the eagle, who flew in circles over the osprey, drove it down to the water. The osprey dropped the fish, and neither one of them got it.
Oh, there you go. That somehow seems just, because the eagle shouldn't have been able to steal it, though I feel bad for the osprey. Yeah, and that was right in this area. Yeah, out of Turner's Falls.
downriver.
Yeah, we don't have nesting ospreys in this area of the river that I know of. I know there's one down near the Big E, so in the West Springfield area.
I think one nested near the nuclear power plant this year,
In
in Vernon.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so they're starting to become more common, which is great. So we'll see how the eagle osprey piece, works. It'll be fun to watch. Any other questions about the nesting or the? So they will nest for life, return to the same place year after year. In terms of longevity, this bird in the foreground has the very romantic name of WO2. Letters, numbers, I think they're not trying to name. There's an avoidance of sort of giving them a more personal name, a more human name. It was a female, and it was found in Northampton in March, so just March 2017. It was 28 years old. So that's the oldest recorded bald eagle that we know of in Massachusetts, but the only reason we know it was that old is because it was banded at Quabbin when it was born. And it was found. It wasn't found dead, but it was found sustaining injuries from on a road, and then died soon after. So it was like the birth and death. You knew that, so you knew exactly how old it was. It was 28. In New York, there was one that was found that was 38. Again, banded the first year of life and found dead. These are just what we know, so it leads me to believe that there could easily be wild eagles out there. So this is all in the wild. That could be 40 years or older, and we just don't know what they are. Think of the eagle as a patriotic bird. In part, it helps me remember their life history, sort of what they're doing throughout the year. Obviously, they are our national emblem, so that makes sense. They tend to breed in the winter, so keep an eye on the river. January, February, we'll start to see the eagles. They should be adding 6 to the nests as they're returning. Eggs are usually laid in early to mid-March. And right around tax day, there's an important day, the eagles hatch, give or take. It's a 35-day incubation, so about 5 weeks, the eagles will hatch. And they fledge right around Independence Day, so in early July, you should start seeing the young flying around. By the time you get to Columbus or Indigenous Peoples' Day, if you're in Vermont, so mid-October, they're going to be on their own. Those eaglets are all on their own, and the adults have left them. That's kind of the year in the life of an eagle. About 50 to 70% of the eaglets do not make it through the first year. So there's a huge mortality rate the first year. Starvation, making it through the winter, figuring out what they're doing. And also just surviving from the chick to the fledgling stage is really challenging. Here's some images from the Barton Cove nest. So this is the last year, 2008. This was taken leap year, 29th, 2008. That was the last year that the nest had a camera on it. It was the nest that was out in the open. Who has watched that nest, seen it on the video cam? It was a great thing to have. And that nest came down in a late July thunderstorm of that same year. So these are the last images we have from the video cam, but it's really kind of fun to see what's happening throughout the year. So here there's no egg. February 29th, no egg. You can tell by her behavior, most likely it's her. Her behavior, she's up, she's not incubating on an egg, which she would want to keep warm. Bad night. So this is the next day, March 1st, snowstorm. Her behavior has really changed. She's now incubating that egg. She's lying on that egg, keeping it warm. So the assumption is that there was an egg laid as of March 1st, one day later. Here we'll go the next day. She's up, moving around. There is an egg. We can see that egg. 2 days after that first egg, we're now March 3rd, there's a second egg. So she'll lay eggs 2 to 3 days apart. It's pretty common. 2 eggs is normal. This was pretty cool. 5 days after that first egg, 3 eggs were in that nest. And that was the first time at the Barton Cove nest that we had 3 eggs laid. It's somewhat unusual, it's not unheard of, but normally 2, somewhere 1 to 3, but 2 is pretty normal, and 1 is very common. Tough winter, tough spring. We know what this is like. We had one of those last year. So this is April 4th, a late winter, early spring. I would call it a really early spring storm. And that's a really difficult time for the eagles to be able to incubate and keep those eggs warm. That's one of the things that happened to the Barton Cove nest. It was not successful this past year because we had a lot of late spring storms. 1 chick made it. This would be a chick. 3.5 months after the eggs were laid. This is mid-June. So it's about a little over 2 months old. Already got its feathers, same size as the adult pretty much. Now we're jumping in 2006, so a couple of years before. I wanted to show you this to give you a sense of the different size of the 2 chicks. So those eggs were laid probably 2 to 3 days apart. And so that's a 2 to 3 day difference. That's a big difference in terms of size. So the older chick is going to be stronger, more aggressive, bigger, and it's going to steal food from the younger chick. It's a strategy that has evolved with eagles, and it pretty much guarantees or hopes to guarantee that at least 1 chick will survive. They may not all survive. So 2-week-old chicks, let's see 10 days later how they're growing. Again, huge difference, almost seems a bigger exaggeration. These are the same 2 chicks. This one is clearly eating more. They will feed up to about 2 pounds of fish a day. That's a lot. So you can imagine how busy the parents will be to try to constantly feed them 2 pounds. If you have 2 chicks, if you have 3, that's a lot of fishing that you're doing. So you need a really good habitat to do that. And this just gives you an image of a chick that's a little older. This is from 2010, one of the last years when they banded the eaglets at Barton Cove. Look at those feet. You know, they say like a puppy feet. You can see how big those feet are. They're huge. and it's also just starting to get its feathers from the down. So this is about 5 weeks old. Again, here's the life cycle in the winter. Mid-March, mid-April should hatch, and we should see them flying by the time we get into July. Keep an eye out. It's kind of an exciting thing. It's one of the first, if you're a birder, the winter can be a little slow, and it's a really exciting thing to get out and see. Keep an eye out on the eagles. Getting into the positive environmental story. Silent Spring came out in 1962. It was a book about, really about pesticides, specifically about how they were affecting birds in a really detrimental way, written by Rachel Carson, and it really spurned the Environmental Defense Fund, which formed 5 years later, and they organized with the sole purpose of trying to ban DDT in this country. 5 years later, they were successful. So what was happening, there was legislation. This is really the birth of the environmental movement, the 1960s legislation, 1966, the Endangered Species Protection Act, which then got more teeth 7 years later with the Endangered Species Act. That protected the bird, protected the nest, protected the habitat. And the improvement in habitat quality really happened once DDT was banned in the United States. DDT was an insecticide used to help combat malaria, help for crops and infestation, and help. So it was sprayed a lot in the 1940s and 50s to combat sort of human and health agricultural issues, and had a lot of detrimental effects on wildlife. So once the habitat was protected, the quality in the habitat improved, then there were reintroduction programs throughout the country, and their populations took off. Just looking at the issue of DDT, it was broadcast spray, so it was about 1,000 times more concentrated in the water than in the plants. These would be the producers of the small, tiny plants that would live in the rivers or in the ocean. These tiny plants are eaten by tiny animals, little tiny insects, invertebrates. These tiny animals are eaten by smaller fish, and each time it becomes 10 times more concentrated. The DDT accumulates in the fat and accumulates in the organ. So by the time the larger fish have eaten the smaller fish, and the fish-eating birds like the osprey, the bald eagle, the peregrine falcon have consumed that, they have 10 million times it's accumulated in their system from what was initially sprayed. What happened with the eagles is that they ended up with really thin shells. The DDT concentration inhibited the calcium production. Those thin shells cracked as soon as the eagles began to incubate the eggs, so there were no new eagles being born. So let's look at 1963. 487 breeding pairs in the country. That's not a lot. That's in the entire 48 states, so very few. DDT's banned, Endangered Species Act, some of the reintroduction programs, and the population starts to take off to the point where in 2007, the bald eagle was removed from the endangered species list. That's really exciting. Most species put on the endangered species list don't get removed. But this animal has done that so well that it has been removed. They estimate now could be 15 to 20,000 pairs in the lower 48 states. So they really, really, really rebounded. And again, as an environmentalist growing up in the 1960s, this is like such an exciting story. There are a lot of pretty depressing stories out there. This is a really exciting story. 487 pairs to over 10,000 breeding pairs. Let's look at Massachusetts. Let's bring it closer to home. Who participated? I'm going to look at some of you. Who participated in the first Mass Audubon Breeding Bird Atlas in the late 70s? Anyone here? Can't remember. How's that? I did not. And if you said you found eagles, we would worry, because there were none. There were no breeding pairs in Massachusetts in the 1970s. And let's look at the next. Who participated in the next Breeding Bird Atlas? I know Rinky did. I helped. So the next Breeding Bird Atlas took place 2007 to 2011. So look, they're now all over the state. That's pretty exciting. So what happened in Massachusetts is there was a restoration program in the 80s that took place at Quabbin. I'll show you some pictures of that. That success has spread throughout New England, and we're really enjoying the success of that in the Connecticut River Valley. It's mostly the Massachusetts birds that are spread to Vermont. Vermont did a very small program, spread into New Hampshire, spread down to Connecticut, and have really spread throughout the state. This is what's called a hacking tower. This was at Quabbin on the Prescott Peninsula. This is the person, they would climb up, stick a black rubber glove with fish, cut up fish, in the back of the tower so that those young eaglets would not imprint on humans. That was the idea. So what they did was, the first year, 1982, they got 3 chicks from Michigan. They flew them here. They had all the permits. This was the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, Mass Audubon, funding from the Bank of Boston, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was involved, Quabbin Reservoir, and they raised those 3 chicks. They fledged successfully. One of those chicks was Ross. Guess what the other chick in that nest was named?
Betsy.
Yeah, Betsy. So Ross came from that first year in 1982. They then continued to expand. Oh, Ross is the father of WO2, the 28-year-old. So we can sort of see some of those connections from that restoration program that started at Quabbin. They expanded, they had multiple nests, they raised a number of chicks per year. They did this for about 7 years, and they had tremendous success. They raised 42 chicks, I think, at Quabbin. They took birds from Michigan and from Canada and brought them here to be raised. And they only took the chick if there were 2 chicks in the nest. So they would leave 1 chick for the adult in Canada or Michigan to raise. So they're just getting ready to fledge. This is sort of the nervous time. They're all banded. This is a wing. They can follow it. Tag. This is kind of the nervous, and I've talked with some of the biologists as they were like watching. They were ready. They opened the tower, and then they hoped that those first flights worked. Some of them were more successful than others. Some of them they rescued and put the young eagles on shore. But they had such tremendous success that it spilled over into the Connecticut River. And in 1989, one of the eagles that was raised at Quabbin was looking for a nest at Quabbin. It was a little too crowded, and they ended up choosing Barton Cove. So here's Massachusetts data. No successful nesting until we get to 1989. 1990, we're talking less than 5. 1990, this was the Barton Cove nest, the first nest on the river. And then look how it's just totally taken off. They estimate there were 76 pairs in 2018, so just this past summer. So this is data up through 2017. And in the past 10 years, the number of breeding pairs have almost doubled. So we're really seeing tremendous growth. Hotspots, we're at. We are at the Connecticut River Valley. Has 12 nests, 12 known active nests as of this past summer. Quabbin has 10. The other hotspots are this Assawamsett lake complex down near Lakeville, sort of in the southeastern part of the state. A lot of large water bodies. And then the Merrimack River. Berkshire's has some. They're really spreading out. They're starting to find them being somewhat successful in the greater Boston area. So they're really doing well. We're lucky because now we can see young eagles. They're a pretty frequent sight. Adult eagles, I looked out our kitchen window the other day, and there was one soaring over our backyard. It was just like, oh wow, there's an eagle. It's really cool. It's not that rare. I mean, it's pretty common, but it's still very exciting. So the nest of Barton Cove, I keep coming back to. This was the last time that they climbed it and banded it, so we got all that data. I want to show you a little clip. It's less than a minute. It's about a new video cam. So it's and it's at the National Arboretum, so right in downtown Washington, right next to the Capitol, right next to the mall. So this is a clip from sort of watching a new chick being born. Great footage. Their nesting season is going to be maybe 3 weeks to a month before ours. There's another, the state of Pennsylvania has another phenomenal eagle cam as well.
Will the pairs hang around that nest all year long, like now?
So what'll happen is they'll be at that nest from the winter until you get into the fall when the young leave. And when the adults leave the young, so the young have to leave.
So they won't stay in that area?
Not necessarily through the next couple months in the winter. They might be around. They want fish, they want food, they need to find food, so they're going to go where there's open water. Like the eagles here would move up and down the river. They may head to Quabbin, maybe the coast. Maybe if water freezes around here, they're going to head south towards the Connecticut shore. So they'll stay somewhat nearby because they're not going to waste their energy traveling a long way if they don't have to.
Yeah, I haven't seen those pairs, so I didn't know if they, but I know open water is a big thing, but is there a lot of open water at the Quabbin?
There is some. I live near there and I walk there a lot, and it's really unusual if I don't see an adult, if I don't see an eagle, any time of year, pretty much. And if you spent, like you can't paddle the river a lot right now, but I think if you did, or you're spending a lot of time on the river in the winter, you would see eagles as well. But I don't see them as frequently as I do when they're feeding their young, because then they're constantly in that same area.
Yeah, I've only seen the eagle once catch a fish on the river.
Yeah.
It's funny, you hear more about, like, on the Quabbin, they're eating dead deer that get on the ice and die and stuff.
Yeah. So the Barton Cove nest, coming back to it, 1989, first year was not successful. 1990 they were successful, and 42 eaglets have fledged from that nest. They are sort of, I'm sure, the parents that are up and down the river because they imprint on that area and return to the same area or close by if they can to breed. I wanted to thank people that have been really generous over the years. Dale Manette, who's a phenomenal photographer. He's a wildlife. He was an educator and a naturalist at the Quabbin Reservoir that's recently retired. He's got a new book out. He's an amazing photographer. He's going to be here actually in March doing a program. He had shared with me the 3 images from the Quabbin, from the Hacking Tower, so from the Massachusetts Restoration Program. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has amazing images. They're all in the public domain through their image library. Mass Wildlife, I had correspondence with staff at Mass Wildlife. Most recently, Andrew Vitz, who's the state ornithologist. He was great in terms of giving me updated information in terms of the last winter count was a number of years ago, 2011. There were over 100 birds in the state in the winter. They do it by flyover, by helicopter. Or you could do it with the resources you have. Tom French has been really instrumental. He's written some amazing articles for Bird Journal. Does anybody get the Bird Journal? There was a great article on Massachusetts, the restoration program. It's specific to New England. You cannot get it online, which is unfortunate at this point. You can only access the paper copy. And he has written a lot about the local eagles. Bill Burns, a photographer, and Bill Davis was the Eagle Project coordinator, and they've been wonderful in terms of sharing and communicating over the years. Bill Dean, I know some of you saw a program that he gave on eagles. He's adopted the Barton Cove Eagle Nest and is my best friend. Every spring when I want to find out what's happening, because I get asked what's happening with eagles. And we don't have the video cam anymore, which was a really easy way to be able to answer it. He spends a lot of time watching the Barton Cove Eagle Nest. He has an amazing photography equipment. And so he can tell by their behavior when the egg was laid, when it hatched, the number. And so we communicate through email, so I always have an update. And I really appreciate his sharing that. And we have an amazing sort of collection from the old video cams and photos that people have taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for Kim? Go ahead.
Do the talons, I should have asked this when you showed that, one of those very first pictures with a wonderful picture of the talons. Are they those ratchet talons like the way, like the peregrine falcon ones where they click on and hold so that they don't have to exert their muscles the whole time to hold the dead animal that they're carrying?
I don't know. It's a great question. I would think so. They use their leg muscles to activate it.
This is the relaxed position for birds, not this, the way ours is
Right,
relaxed
right.
like this. So that if they hitch onto something without needing any strength or anything, they're going to stay hitched.
But the peregrine actually has almost like a ratchet, like
A special,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I don't know whether the bald eagle has that or not.
So I'll come back to the student of ornithology. I will catch you in January for the Murder of Crows program.
Great.
Hopefully I'll see ya, and I'll get to research that. And this is why I love doing this stuff, because you never know everything, and it's really fun to learn. They do ball up their talons. Like in that video, I was watching it, when they have a really young chick. So they purposely ball up their talons when they're moving around the nest when they have a really young chick, because they don't want to damage that chick for any reason. But I will work on that. Thank you.
Other questions?
I'll go back to the optics. You mentioned the two different focal lengths in each eye. Are there two different lenses in each eye, or does one lens focus two different
I
sections?
think there's one lens. They talked about focal points, not two different lenses. They called them focal points. One was the fovea and one was the foveavis, or two very similar terms that they technically described it. So I think the lens is able to sort of focus on two different places, which is pretty amazing. And it's really unusual, which is why it's been given that. It's pretty cool. I can watch that and I can watch this, and focus on both. Not just kind of watch, but focus on both.
Other questions?
Other questions?
Were eagles ever endangered in Alaska?
Spraying occurred in Alaska because of the lumber industry, and so all large animals and birds in particular, because as she pointed out, it's the shell of the birds that gets affected by the spraying, the DDT in particular. That's what happened in northern Maine. Again, the lumbering of spruce and fir against the spruce budworm, and the eagles almost disappeared. And the difference was amazing, because in 1954, I started the headwaters of the St. John Rivers and went to the very most northern point of Maine, about a 5-week trip. And every day in 1954, we saw eagles. 10 years later, I had a friend that took that trip and saw no eagles. And DDT was, The other thing, there are a couple of things I wanted to mention that she kind of covered. One was about Rachel Carson's book. It has a unique status. It's the only complete book that's ever been read into the congressional record. And a group of senators got up one after another and read the whole thing, which is pretty amazing. The other thing she mentioned briefly was she wasn't sure what was going to happen to the osprey with the increase in eagles in the valley. This year, for the first time in about 15 years, the ospreys that nest on the top of the towers in Vernon, one of those towers that tickle wires, did not nest there. And it's the first year that the eagles nested at the south end of that area, right near the dam. And the guess is that they couldn't compete with eagles. And I have seen eagles take fish right from an osprey. So that.
Getting back to your Alaska question, so 1949, I think, Alaska was applying to be I don't know if I have the dates right, not that long ago, was applying to be the 49th state. So somewhat recently, there was still a bounty for $1 if you produce 2 eagle feet.
Really?
This isn't that long ago.
People
in other words, they were so common in Alaska, and it was written into their law that they could do the bounty because they wanted to protect the food source, which would be the fish. And so there was a bounty on eagles pretty recently. And they had to eliminate the bounty if they were to apply to be accepted as a state that had a national emblem of the eagle, and they had a bounty on killing the eagles. So I think the population in Alaska has always been relatively healthy. I don't
was
know about
healthy.
the DDT
Well,
impact, because any data you see is from the lower 48
It was healthy in the
states.
federal lands. Outside the federal lands,
So I was up there 10 years ago, and we went to one spot, and it was like, I referred to them as like a pigeon flock. There were so many eagles. It wasn't quite like a pigeon
Yeah.
flock, but there was like a ton, everywhere you looked, you saw.
Well, even I lived in.
Could be like the Connecticut
Juneau
River.
in
Well, it was, I mean, wow.
1976. And I lived in Juneau, which is on the inland waterway, in 1976, 76, anyway, 75, 76. And there were lots and lots. That was the first time I'd ever seen an eagle. And if you took a walk, they were all over the limbs, sticking out over the water.
Like you
just
could see
every-
100 of them, like,
There weren't as many
Yeah.
as that, but.
Well, I mean,
but
you
there
could just look at it as a
were
big bay.
there are probably more now, because
Yeah.
that was still very edge of the time when they had just finished banning DDT, but
Yeah.
there were plenty of
Yeah.
eagles. I've never, like I say, I've never seen one before. I lived in Massachusetts, grew up
I
in
know,
Massachusetts.
I know. We didn't see them as kids. We wouldn't have seen
Yeah.
them as kids.
Yeah, I didn't see them.
So I don't know most of what I've read, it's been in the lower, it refers to the lower 48
yeah, I
states.
just wondered if they
Yeah.
were always, not endangered really up there, because when we went up, there was just like tons of them, it was like unbelievable.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of the DDT applications took place there.
Yeah, I
I
didn't
don't
think
know that much
agriculture
about
was
the
that big
detail.
of-
I think it was more. in this
which
area.
companies produce DDT?
I don't know the specifics about it. I know that the intent was to, reduce malaria, protect crops. So it was, the intent was for human health in the 1940s and 50s, and it created a huge problem in terms of, accumulation and environmental issues. I don't know the specific companies. I do know, though, that although it's been banned in the United States, it's not banned worldwide. So there's a big difference. And in Massachusetts, it was not banned until 1977. It was federally banned in 1972. Massachusetts didn't ban them until 1977 because using DDT was the best way to kill bats. And it was okay. We've come a long way, but so they would put DDT so the bats, when they would enter their nest, would bring it with them, and then they would glean and preen each other, and then they would die. So it was a common practice if you wanted to eliminate bats. So sometimes I feel like we really have come a long way, because I know that shocks all of us in this room, and this was in our state in 1977.
Why would you want to kill a bat?
Well, that would be the question. But people killed eagles too. They were hunted and.
Well, I can see maybe somebody would stuff them in sport, and that's what I was going to ask. Like I've seen a lot of like birds of prey, but never an eagle stuffed. Like, and I imagine people did that. Like when you go on safari to Africa to shoot a
Right.
elephant or a tiger, why would like?
But that would be part of the advantage of why I have to have a permit even to have the feathers.
Where did you find
Because it
your
protects
feathers?
them. I got them from Mass Wildlife from the state.
Oh, okay.
So eagles that were raised in captivity, Tom McCarty's eagles and some other eagles that were raised, or if they found dead eagles, I got them from Mass Wildlife. But it's a federal permit that I have from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but that's what I got.
What's interesting about the bats, I think bats just for some reason had bad names.
No,
People
rabies
didn't
and
like
stuff like
them.
that, but they eat a lot of
But
bugs.
you know
and
those
stuff.
electric bug killers?
Yeah.
One family of bats will kill 10 times what one of those things do. So those people, instead of putting those electric lights out, should be putting a bat house out.
Yeah.
Good thing is.
And they tend to kill the insects that we don't like for some reason. And it is just a personal thing. And it's crazy.
So there are handouts over there, more information on eagles, newsletters, please grab one. If you have any other questions, just please come on after. Thank you for coming.